Bum-ba-da-dum! Howdy, y'all. Banjo Ben here at banjobenclark.com. I'm really excited about today's lesson. This is a very special lesson that I actually developed for one of my virtual cabin camps. Virtual cabin camps allow people all over the world to come and join me for a full evening of banjo with some of the most respected and revered guest teachers. And my particular session for my virtual banjo camp was called Target Note Timing. Now, you'll learn all about what that means here in a bit, but I think this is one of the keys to making you a more interesting and creative banjo player. We talk about the notes that you expect to hear in banjo licks and how to subtly move those ahead, behind in your timing to create all new licks, to create expectation and a little bit of tension that you want as a good banjo player. When you think about this particular technique, your favorite banjo players throughout history and even today, especially today, use this. And I think that a lot of times they do it without thinking about it. But my point is, I'm going to show you how to think about it and how to do it, how to take licks that you already play and make them more interesting and sound really like completely new licks. If you're watching this somewhere like Banjo Ben or YouTube or Facebook, somewhere like that, you can see this full lesson, download the tabs at banjobenclark.com as a Gold Pick member. If you're not a Gold Pick member, you need to be, folks. Go to joinbanjoben.com to see all the benefits of being a Gold Pick member. And I would love to have you on board one of my future virtual camps or virtual lives. You can register for those leading up, but then I do not release that content except for this special one after the fact. You have to register beforehand to be able to get that content from the guest instructors. So be sure and catch the next one. You can see all of those at banjobenevents.com. But let's jump right into this lesson now of banjo target timing. All right, folks, let's learn some banjo. I hope that you've got your banjos out and tuned. Whenever I thought about this topic of, what makes you tick as a banjo player, I thought, one thing that I have in common with these other three instructors is that I do play the banjo. One thing I don't have in common with them is I'm not near as recorded on the banjo as they are. So I didn't really have a lot of kind of legacy recordings, well-known recordings I could point to try to illustrate my style. And that just got me thinking, regardless of recordings, what do I think about a lot as a banjo player? Or what have I thought, here's a better way to say it, what have I thought about more as time has progressed as a banjo player? Because there's been things that have changed with me as a picker over the years. I don't get to practice as much now. I know that's changed. But one of the things that's changed is I've drawn more and more away from trying to get as fast as I could get, trying to learn as hard a licks as I could learn, and really trying to focus on just tasty, clever things. That's why I'm really excited about Ron's session tonight, because just looking through the tab of what the things that he plays, I think, even if I didn't know who Ron Stewart was, if I could do all the things in my mind and my fingers that I wish I could do, taste-wise, clever-wise, I would play like Ron. And so I'm not going to teach anything that Ron's going to teach, but I do want to talk about something that I know he uses a lot in his playing. And what I call it is, this is something I never taught before. What I'm calling is target note timing. And I'll explain what that means. I'm getting a text here from Mark saying that my video is a little bit distorted, and he's refreshed his screen and it's still a little bit distorted. You might try a couple different refreshes, but again, that's why we record these things, and it will be in 4K when you watch the recording. I can't control how Elon Musk is pulling his levers right now. But let's get our banjos. And I think I'm tuned up close enough. I'll pull up some tab here in just a little bit, but let me explain a bit about the concept of what I mean when I say target note time. A lot of what I think makes clever banjo playing is, and this goes for any instrument, but especially banjo, is when you are expecting a note to happen on an instrument, but the note doesn't happen. The note either delays and comes in a little later, or the note might come a little early. And that technique of kind of playing with the listener is, I think, one of the funnest parts of music, right? So Again, I'm getting the blurry screen text from my team. I apologize about that. I can't do anything about it. So we'll just hope that it clears up here in just a bit. I think it's one of the most common or one of the most clever things that we can do as musicians. Let me just give you an example. Whenever we're playing something like our regular old G lick, what note comes next? Right? We're expecting with our ears to hear that last G note. That's the way that G lick goes, right? It's a very common lick. But I think one of the funnest things we can do as a banjo player is to take that last target note, that last G note, and either withhold that to come in a little bit later, or maybe even serve it up a little bit early to surprise the listener, okay? And what this does is it allows us to bring in another layer to our banjo playing that goes beyond just the normal licks. And it allows us to take a lot of licks that we already know and immediately turn them into licks and phrases that we've never played before and that create different emotion, right? That create a different reaction. And that's really what we're going for as pickers, right? We're trying to, with our music, with our note selection, with our tone, we're trying to create emotion in either ourselves as we listen to it or whoever might be listening to us, okay? So what we might do, let me just show you an example here on the tab of the lick that I was just playing. So that's measure 1. Let me scoot my iPad over here in front of me. So that's measure 1 that I just played. And you'll see that I have the yellow highlighted note be my target note. That's that G note that we're expecting to hear. So this is a very common Scruggs 2-measure phrase that can be played, anywhere in backup or in lead. What I mean by target note timing is to take this target note, this highlighted in yellow, and just mess with that timing. Either scoot it this way a little bit or scoot it this way. Now, what do we do whenever we scoot it later in the measure? Well, people's ears are expecting to hear it right here on this downbeat of 1. But when we withhold it and we serve it a little later, it creates kind of a reflex in the listener that creates emotion, right? We're getting a little technical about it. I think a lot of people just do this naturally, but this is what's happening. They expect to hear it right here, but we're going to serve it up somewhere over here, and they're going to miss that note just for a minute, and then whenever we play it for them, they're going to say, oh, thank you so much. I wanted to hear that note. That was such a great banjo phrase. Or we might take this note and scoot it back a little bit. So what would happen if we took this note, and I'm calling this just the and of 1. So you'll notice we took the G note that was right here and we just scooted it a half beat later. Very cool. What would that sound like? You hear that? A little faster? You probably heard JD do that kind of stuff all the time, right? So this G note that people expect to hear right here, we just bumped it out. And you know what? Even though it's very similar to the first lick, it's got a whole different swagger to it. Do you hear that? It's got a whole different gallop to it to not have that G note land right on that downbeat. All right, so it kind of pushes us forward. It creates, I think, part of what people refer to whenever they say drive and words like groove and things like that is whenever we start pushing and pulling these notes that are the anchors of the melody or the measure. Okay, can we do that again? Yeah, in fact, before we do that though, here's something that we're going to see in Ron's playing. I actually wrote this before I looked at Ron's tab. I thought, oh man, Ron does this. And that is, instead of playing another note on that downbeat where we were expecting this note to be, we play nothing. We let a rest be there. Now that has an even added effect, right? Because people are expecting to hear that G note, but they get absolutely nothing. They get a little silence. And so something, even when they don't know anything about music, just something in their subconscious says, where's my note? And then boom, you punch them with the note right after that. And they're like, oh. And what it does is it makes that note that used to be normal and used to be repetitive, always following that downbeat, it makes that note have more weight, even if you don't play it louder or harder. It just makes that root note have a spotlight shined on it, all because we just moved it a half step and maybe left a little space in there. So I'll play this tab so you can hear what that sounds like. Pretty cool, a little faster. What you could even do is mute the strings. You can do it with your left hand on that downbeat there in that second measure to create an even more stark silence. Pretty cool. That really makes that note shine out. So if you're wanting to call attention to maybe a banjo solo coming in, or halfway through a banjo solo, something like that, one of the most powerful things that you can do as a banjo is to create silence, right? We always think about playing all these eighth notes and 16th notes as banjo players, but it's a lot of times the silence that makes us listen to the banjo more. Pretty cool. Can we do something else? Absolutely. Here, we could take that target note and move it even another half beat forward or back, however you want to think about that. Put it on the 2. Okay, now this doesn't have the syncopated effect that we had before, but it does delay that note to where it calls some attention to it. Now, what do we do on the first beat if we've moved this target note to the second beat? Well, whatever you want to do. This is just one option. You don't have to play those strings just like I have, but this is what it sounds like. Pretty cool. Now, one thing I want you to notice is that I naturally simplified the second half of this measure as compared to the second half of the ones before. Why did I do that? You know, I don't really know, except that I found just by my ear, as I was playing around with this, that whenever I moved this target note to the second beat, it made me not want a bunch of busy stuff over here. I think because the spotlight is now shining toward the middle of this measure, and you don't want anything really taken away from it. I tried it several different ways. I mean, this is before I wrote the tab, and I thought, man, I just like to simplify it. It just helps it stand out more whenever we do that. Pretty cool. Now, we've talked and given several examples of how to move that target note later in the measure. I think one of another effect we can do that has just as much weight to it is whenever we play it a little early. Do you see what we've done here? So where would that target note normally land? It would normally land on this downbeat right here. We're going to take it and play it on the end of 4, a half beat early. Pretty cool. All right. So here it is if we were to play on the downbeat. Sorry. But what if I play a little early? I'll play the tab. You hear that? Boom, boom. Okay, so we're serving up this note just a little earlier than what people expect. For some reason, whenever I think about doing this and messing with the timing, I think about boxing, which is an art. It's technique, it's a sport, it's also an art. And you know how what boxers do to one another is a lot like what we're doing right here. They set up patterns, get their opponent used to hearing and seeing something at a certain time, and then they switch up the order by just a little bit, and it creates surprise. And that's what we're doing here. We're just serving it up a little early. I think about it like a little jab. You know, people are going to be used to hearing it right here, but we just serve it up a little early. Pretty cool. Now, another effect that you can put on top of this that I really like to do is to serve it early and then also serve it again. And what that does is shine a giant spotlight on this note that we're wanting to bring attention to. And when you combine this kind of thing with a rhythm section that knows how to really punch certain beats and work with you, that can hear what you're doing, this is when you create some really powerful bluegrass, in my opinion, that's just explosive. All right, so I'm going to play it a half beat early, and then I'm going to rest on that beat, first downbeat, and then play it again. So, okay, so now we've played this target note twice within a couple beats, but not on the place that people's ears normally would hear it. Pretty cool. So you're really telling people like this G note, this G string is very important, and I'm going to make every eye and every ear out there pay attention to this G note that I'm playing. That's kind of the way that I think about it. Okay, so there it is in the context of a G lick that we play all the time. So think about this. Even with what we've looked at today, a lot of you, I'm sure most of you know that lick. And you know all kinds of things to follow up with it. But now you know 4 or 5 different ways to play it. And I think a lot of times people think and wonder about how many licks they know. And they leave so much low-hanging fruit. They leave so much low-hanging fruit because you can take licks that you already know and mess with the timing and create new licks, right? So don't forget that licks aren't just notes. Licks are also the time of those notes. And so you could take notes that you know, licks that you know, and just adjust timing to make your playing sound quite diverse. Let's try it with another lick. This time we'll do something over a D chord, okay? Maybe still in the key of G, but we'll just have a couple measures of D. This is probably a lick that y'all are familiar with. Sounds like this. Walking back up to a G chord. Pretty cool. So that target note is highlighted there. Everybody's ears are being drawn down to this low D string. That's the nature of the lick. That's the note. Okay, so let's just walk through the same process that we did with those G licks. So the first thing we did is we just scooted it 1/2 beat later on the and of 1. So what are we going to play on that first downbeat? Well, you can play whatever you want. I chose this time to just play that G string. So it sounds like this. Now that sounds pretty cool. It introduces some syncopation immediately, right? To me, that's quite a bit more interesting than the other way. That first way that I played it, to me, is very square. It's right inside the box. Nothing wrong with it. It's just how you learned it, right? But whenever we push it out, it creates a stutter step. It creates some syncopation that, to me, just makes it more interesting. It doesn't mean that it's better. It's just a little more interesting. So if I was playing a song, say my backup, and I'm going to do something like this every time we come around to that 2 measures of D, I might play it straight the first time. And then the next time we come around, there's no reason why we can't just play it a little different. Right? Pretty cool. Let's look at other ways that we can do it. The first thing we saw, let me move my tab, is we kept it on the and of 1. We just introduced a rest, right? To make this note shine even more. What does that sound like? That's pretty cool. Now you'll notice also I switched this note, and that's just because I accidentally played it when I was practicing it. I thought, I'm going to tab that out because this C note is the 7th, the dominant 7th of a D chord, right, of a D7. So that note helps push us forward to the G chord, which is where this imaginary song is going. Remember that we could also mute it over that rest to get a little bit more of effect. Pretty cool, huh? All right, what else can we do? Well, we can scoot it all the way to the second beat. And again, this just, in my opinion, made me want to simplify the rest of this measure. Nothing's wrong with simple, folks, especially when you're going fast. Simple is often better. Try that again. That's pretty cool. You know, if you've been hearing this all night, and then you hear this, isn't that interesting? I think that's interesting. If you're just used to hearing that D note land on the downbeat and then you delay it, pretty doggone cool. Okay, let's look at some others. What else did we do? Oh, we talked about scooting it early. Now that requires a little bit of a thumb twister on your pick hand because I'm having to reach down and grab that note with my index finger. Now, in reality, on a lot of speeds, you can get a double thumb down there. Okay, but if you're going really fast, you're probably going to need to jump up with your index finger. I love that particular lick, doing that, throwing that low D string in a little bit early. Again, you're used to hearing it right there. We're just going to serve it up a little bit early. And then if we do early and again, it might look something like this. Again. And also did some bluesy walk-ups there, right? A little different than before. I'm just trying to give you some variation on what we can do. Because I don't want you to just learn my tab note for note. I want you to think about the actual principles that we're doing. And that brings me to my kind of final point here, is that you can do this with any lick combination that you have. I mean, in fact, it would be a really great exercise if you just played through a solo for something or a version of something, or just played through some of your favorite licks and just identify these licks that you think, gosh, I play these the same way every time, and just figure out where we can start pushing and pulling some licks. I think I do have a lesson on the site called Pushing Licks. That might be a guitar lesson. I don't know if I've ever done this on banjo, at least not like this. But you could take, any song. If you had a I'll Fly Away. I mean, right there. Dun, 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 dun. Everybody's expecting to hear glad morning when this life is o'er. You could push that or, that B note. You see what I did there? I just, instead of playing that B note, I started with my fifth string and made that B note the and of one. And it just delays it a little bit. It just automatically adds a little bit of groove into our playing, because it's not just right on the nose. There are times in melodies where you don't want to do that, at least not very much, because maybe the timing of that melody is so central to being able to recognize that melody. And if you took a song like I'll Fly Away and you moved all of those concrete melody notes ahead and back, I think it could get a little too slippery. You need gloves to play it. But you could do it here and there, and it would really, I think, make it more interesting. Okay? So that is a lesson that I think is pretty fun. Target note timing. That's something that I, when I was first learning to play banjo, and I was just concentrating on licks and stealing other people's licks, this isn't really something that I considered a lot of, because I thought that I just had to play it like everybody else. But there comes a time where you start making it your own. And now all those licks that you learned are perfect fodder for you to take and start messing with that timing, pushing and pulling those notes that everybody, including yourself, is used to hearing. Okay, with that, I want to just open up the Q&A. If you have any questions about any of that in particular, I want to take a moment to answer those, or any other questions. If they get too outside the realm of the topic, I might hold off until the very end. But please, if you have any questions, go ahead and start entering those. And I think we might do a little giveaway, even right now, as we get started. Let me get prepared for that. You're going to have this tab that I just talked through on the download tomorrow. I think it will be tomorrow. And but if not tomorrow, it'll be the next day. And we'll get this whole event to you. I apologize if the screen's still been a little bit blurry. You'll be able to see all of that clear as day on the recording. Just gonna wait for a moment. What kind of banjo are you using? It's funny. That's a good question, Isaac. That is actually a gold tone twanger, which I never play. So if you don't know the history there, myself and one of my good buddies, Robbie Boone, who's one of my favorite banjo players, and my general store manager, Jake Stogdill, we had the idea for somebody to create an affordable version of a pre-war Gibson, and to do that in a way that make it more obtainable for folks with with hobby budgets. And so we approached several different makers. It was finally Gold Tone that kind of saw the vision there. And they created what's called the OB3, and we call it the Twanger, playing off the name of the banger, right? And this, I think, is actually number 2. I gave number 1 to Robbie, just as an honor to him. Just love that guy. And this is number 2, and it mainly just sits in a stand. But I just got it out yesterday, and it hadn't had the strings changed in forever. I thought, man, that thing sounds great. So I thought I'd play it. The other banjos I normally play, I've got a copy of JD's Wreath. They're made by Warren Yates. That's probably my favorite banjo that I play right now, and or not the Wreath. I'm sorry, the 75. And then I also play Davis banjos when I'm able to get them in stock, but then everybody always buys them from me after I get them. So that's what I'm playing these days. Let's see. Any other questions? Like what would be too early or too late? Yeah, it's a great question, Alex. I think too early or too late would be if you stuck that target notes in a place that people don't have the context for it anymore. That's why I didn't push out any past the second beat, because I think once you get out past that, people have kind of forgotten what was supposed to happen, right? And I think that if you do much more than a half beat beforehand, people might not hear it in context. So I would say like a half beat before up to a beat after would kind of be the way to do it to get that particular effect. That's a really, really good question. Yes, Mark Roki got number 3 on that. You mentioned that other band members could help emphasize the rhythm on that double hit on the G or target note. What should other instruments do? Yeah, I'm thinking mainly the rhythm guitar, doing like a chord punch, I don't have my guitar handy here, but if they're gonna, like, if I'm playing with somebody like Kenny Smith, like a really sensitive, reactionary rhythm player that's listening to what you're doing, he might hear me do something like that. And if he knows I'm going to do that again, you can almost bet that he's going to have some kind of emphasis on his guitar to match what I'm putting emphasis on, just to support it. Okay, so in fact, we were recording a version of Fireball Mel, me and Kenny, and I was doing like this rest type thing with a rake where I just dropped out for an 8th note, and he was like, hold on, before we do that, let me make sure of where you're doing that, because he wanted to line up his rhythm guitar with that, and that's what he rested when I rested, and he punched whenever I raked and kind of mimicked that, and it made the banjo rake just explode. So a mandolin player might choose to do more of a chord strum rather than a muted chop, like to punch those target notes with you. But that's the kind of fun things that you can work out if you're in a band situation, or if you jam with people a lot, you'll start to kind of hear what they might do. Sometimes it happens, you coordinate by accident, and that's when it gets really fun. Is the note you are getting playful with always the root note or the last note in the riff? Great question, Derek. It's not always the root note. It's the note that I might be wanting to hear. Okay. So oftentimes, I don't have my picks on anymore, but you might be playing this lick, just over a G chord, and that's a D note up there. That's kind of that target note. And so that wouldn't be the root. That's just the one that I'm trying to call attention to. For instance, kind of the straight ahead application of that lick might be something like this, right? But you'll hear people do stuff like this. They're doing the same type of thing. They know that you might be wanting to hear everything on the downbeat, but however you want to syncopate that. But that's the same type of principle that we're talking about here. Is just taking notes that you're used to hearing maybe a certain time, or that your ear wants to hear, depending on what that melody is, and just serving it early or late. Really great question. You're welcome, Mary. You're welcome, Alex. We'll see you, Ed. Be back soon. Very good. We'll see you here in just a bit. All right. Very good. Well, those are great questions. I think that helped clarify there. North of the Mason-Dixon line, it's a brush. South of the Mason-Dixon line, it's a rake. I haven't done the demographic research on that, but that might be true. Very good. you.